This is a video about the casting process. While we've discussed what an actor does on stage, we haven't yet discussed how the actor gets on stage. This process, which happens before the first rehearsal, is called the casting process. After this video, you'll watch a short video of a Broadway casting director about how he and his firm cast shows for Broadway. The first step of any actor's process is getting the audition material together. So first things first, an actor will prepare audition material, including monologues, which are about 1 to 2 minute speeches that show off a actor's ability to either be funny or tragic or comedic or dramatic. You get the idea. Or how they handle text. So in an audition for something like Tartuffe, an actor would prepare a monologue that would handle heightened language to show that they were adept at using heightened language. An actor will also prepare headshots. The selfie camera has been very kind to actors, and so but even without the selfie cam, actors will often spend quite a lot of money on professional headshots, so pictures of themselves that allow a casting director, a producer, whoever is in charge of the audition process, to imagine that person in that picture in that role. Headshots are the foot in the door, and they're very important in the audition process. An actor will also produce a resume, and this is not a traditional work resume. This is an acting resume, so it'll have all of the roles that the actor has ever been in. Within reason, actors who have been working for quite some time often will truncate their resume so that only the most recent or the most relevant pieces are listed there. An actor will also list special skills, so if they're adept in dialects, so say they're very good at doing an Irish dialect, they write that on there. Often actors will write silly things onto their resume to try to pique the interest of the casting director. I have an actor friend who is a distant relation of Bluebeard the pirate, and he puts that on his resume, and that has in fact gotten him a couple of auditions. I don't think it got him any roles, but it got his foot in the door, and sometimes that's all you can ask. An actor might also get an agent, and an agent is helpful in that they will help you get your stuff submitted. They'll help you pick out that monologue. They'll help you get your headshot and resume ready so that you have a better chance of getting your foot in the door. So the second step, once an actor has done all of that, is that they'll look for audition notices, so casting calls. Places like Backstage, or Variety, which used to be paper, are now online sources where you can find these potential jobs. And an actor will submit themselves. They'll submit their headshot and resume, or they'll have their agent do it, based on descriptions of characters in the casting calls that they fit. If the producers and directors or casting directors think that the actor is appropriate for a role based on their headshot and resume, they will then bring them in for an audition. So similar to other job interview processes, there's a whole lot of steps in getting from an actor practicing their role at home to the actor who got the role and who's working on stage. While you might, if you're not going into acting, have one good interview or go on 5 interviews for potential early jobs. I know some of you have missed class for interviews, so you're familiar with this process. For an actor, their job period is more like a temp agency, and they might be working for 2 to 3 months on a particular play, depending on how long the run of the play is. And so they're constantly interviewing and constantly being rejected. Even if you're a really good actor, you're not going to get every role you audition for. You can't possibly. So if you know any actors, be kind to them. It is a difficult profession, and it requires a lot of stamina to really make it. I mentioned casting calls. So what does a character description look like from a casting call? This is from Fences. It's from Backstage, one of the sources I mentioned, for Troy Maxon. It says it's a lead. That tells you that if it's a main role or a supporting role. It'll tell you if it's male or female right there. And it'll give an age range. So if you are a man in that age range, you might be right for the role of Troy Maxon. You all have read the play, so you have a lot more background. But if you haven't read the play and you're just looking quickly to see if this is something that you might be good for, that gives you a lot of information right off the bat. But then we have a couple of sentences that describe who this person is. So, former baseball star in the Negro Leagues, now works for the sanitation department, lifting garbage into the truck. Husband to Rose, father to Lions, Corey and Raynell, and brother to Gabriel, and best friend to Jim Bono. Some singing. So we've got a slight description. He's a family man. He lifts garbage, so we know he has to be a little bit strong, and he needs to be able to sing a little bit. This is all important information because those are the things that we'll look for on a resume to make sure, resume and headshot, to make sure that this particular actor can do all of the things that this particular role needs. Next, we have the ethnicity of Troy Maxon, and that's described right here as African American, African descent. So that is the preferred ethnicity for the character of Troy Maxon. We know from reading it that the play is about the Black experience in Pittsburgh in the 1950s. It would not make a lot of sense to have a white man play Troy Maxon. The play's meaning would change fundamentally. The intention of the playwright would be shifted. But you can't just say we're only looking for African American or African descent actors, because that would be employment discrimination. Actors Equity, the Actors Equity Union, has put forth these guidelines where you can describe the character's race in order to maintain the integrity of the casting process and the playwright's intention, while also not being explicitly discriminatory. Nothing in here says that a white man can't submit for the role, but they would be very unlikely to get the part based on the character description. Finally, you have a section called Required Media. So for this particular role, what they're looking for in order to get it is not a resume, but a headshot photo and a video reel. So the headshot we talked about already. The video reel would be clips of this actor in a variety of different roles to give them a sense of who this actor is and what he's able to do. It's not quite an audition, but or a monologue, but it's similar to that. And that's what a casting call generally looks like. Here's a few more notes about casting and issues within casting. I've already sort of begun to mention some of the issues that involve race. There are two sort of schools of thought going on in casting right now about colorblind casting and color-conscious casting. Colorblind or non-traditional casting is defined by Actors Equity as the casting of ethnic minority actors in roles where race or ethnicity is not germane. So that means in a play like Tartuffe, where it says that they are French, and it's 17th century, but it's also quite old, and no one has explicitly said that they are white or black or Latino or Asian or any ethnicity whatsoever, really. It would be open for non-traditional casting. The other idea is color-conscious casting, and that's the idea that race is acknowledged in and ideally deepens theatrical conversations. So non-traditional casting often doesn't think about what race does to the meaning of a play. They're looking for the best actor for a role when that role is not explicitly already defined by race, like Troy Maxon would be. So this is something, if you look at Tartuffe, for example, he's not explicitly stated what race he is. So it would be right for non-traditional casting, whereas Troy Maxon is pretty explicit. Color-conscious casting, on the other hand, would think about what does race do if we put an Asian man with the rest of the cast as all white as the role of Tartuffe. So it's the idea that we acknowledge that race is always going to be part of what we're seeing and what we understand in the world of a play, and that we think critically and we engage critically with that in the casting process. And I'm not saying that having an Asian Tartuffe and a entirely white rest of the cast would be a good way to go forward with Tartuffe. but it is an example of what happens when we think about what that story looks like. We also have this conversation about gender. What happens if you cross-cast a role that's supposed to be a woman as a man, or a role that's supposed to be a man as a woman? What happens if Tartuffe is a woman? It changes the nature of the play. You can also think about gender in terms of cross-dressing characters, or characters that are dragged. All of these are options with casting, but should be done by a critically engaged production team that's thinking about what those choices mean and not just what was the needs in that moment. Finally, representation matters. It's important to have stories that feel like they represent us on stage and in movies. And the casting process is where that happens. In class this week, in your small groups, we will be digging into questions of casting. So start thinking about how you would describe the roles in your small group play and how you would cast them. This week in class, as a final reminder, you will be back in your breakout sessions, and we are done with Benton Hall, so you will be in your group of 60, not in our giant lecture hall. Make sure you've revisited your small group play. We will be finishing your final group work over the next 2 weeks, and this will primarily involve your small group play, so it will be to your best interest to go over it and remind yourself about what happens and who the characters are, so that you can do the work in class. We'll see you on Thursday.